Welcome back to Driftwood Stories, where the wind hums through olive branches and ancient truths rise slowly like the morning mist. Tonight we walk not among thunder or war, but through fields of quiet wonder. Long before cities, long before names were carved into marble or stars were charted in the sky, there was only the earth, and the hunger that followed her. But one goddess looked upon that hunger, and with silent hands sowed something new. Her name was Demeter, mistress of grain and green, guardian of the sacred cycle. She did not shout, nor strike, nor shine with fire. She simply stepped barefoot across the soil, and where she walked, life followed. Tonight we journey with her, through dust and dawn, hearth and seed, to the village of Eleusis, where the first whisper of the harvest was born. So close your eyes and feel the earth breathe beneath you. The story begins. Chapter 1. Before the fields, before the sickle, before the plough, before the bread that fills and the fire that warms, there was only gathering, and waiting, and hunger. The early mortals lived among the trees, foraging, wandering, bending to whatever roots or berries the wild would offer. They had no name for seasons, only the cold and the not cold. No calendar, only the rising and falling of hunger in their bellies. The earth was beautiful, yes, but it was indifferent. Rains came without warning. Winds flattened the trees. In one day the hills could bloom with fruit, and in the next bear themselves to silence. The gods watched, Zeus with his storms, Poseidon with his waves, Artemis with her wild creatures. All had their realms. But Demeter, she looked with different eyes. She saw the way a child cried for food, the way mothers dug roots with bare hands, the way mortals lit small fires and gathered around them like petals curling to a flame. And something stirred within her, not pity, not even sorrow, but care. Deep, slow, ancient care, like the steady heartbeat of the soil. She walked the earth unseen, her footprints vanishing behind her. In her passing, a flower might bloom, or a tree bend softly. But she made no grand signs, no thrones or temples. She was searching, not for worship, but for readiness. And far to the west, in a quiet village nestled by a low hill, she felt it, a hearth tended carefully, a child's laughter despite the empty pot, a kindness offered even when there was little to give. Eleusis. And there Demeter laid down her divine crown, cloaked herself in plain cloth, and became something else, a traveller, a stranger, a woman tired from the road, and with her she carried the seed of everything to come. Chapter 2. The Goddess in Disguise. She came at dusk. The sun hung low, spilling amber across the hills, as if the sky itself had brushed the earth with honey. Smoke curled from a few chimneys in Eleusis, where the villagers prepared thin stews, stirred by quiet hands. No one saw her arrive. She did not descend in light, nor ride upon clouds. She walked slowly, leaning on a carved wooden staff. Her cloak was dust-worn, the colour of old linen. Her hair, once bright as ripe wheat, was veiled in grey. To mortal eyes she was an elder, perhaps forgotten, perhaps wandering, with no name but the weight of years. They called her Doso when they asked her name. She smiled faintly and gave no other. It was the house of Eleusis, the village elder, that opened its door. He was kind, though his fields were barren, and his wife, Metanera, feared for the winter. Still, they welcomed the stranger, offering what little they had, a bowl of barley water, a place by the hearth, and a blanket stitched with old thread. Demeter, Dosso, sat in silence. She watched, she listened, to the crackling of fire, the laughter of Demeter, their youngest son, as he chased dust motes with his hands, the murmured prayers Metanera whispered as she stirred the pot with slow circles. That night the stars wheeled quietly overhead, and in the courtyard, where dry soil cracked between the stones, something new began to stir. Tiny shoots, barely visible, green as breath. In the days that followed, Doso did not rest. She swept the hearth, she sang to the flames, she taught the children soft songs in forgotten tongues. She walked the edge of the fields and placed her hand to the soil, whispering words that sounded more like wind than speech. And the village began to change. The hens laid more eggs, the goats gave sweeter milk, barley heads rose taller than they had in years. Still, no one asked too many questions. They only said the old woman was blessed. And perhaps, in time, the earth had finally decided to be kind. Chapter 3, Eleusis at Dusk. There is a certain kind of quiet that falls on a village at dusk. Not silence, but stillness. A pause between the breath of day and the sigh of night. In Eleusis, that quiet grew deeper. It was not fear, nor wonder, just peace. The villagers did not know why the wind felt softer, or why the dogs no longer barked at passing shadows, or why the ground, long tired and dry, now smelled faintly of rain, even on cloudless days. They only knew that since the old woman had come, something had changed. Metanera watched her closely. Dosso, as she was called, never asked for more than bread and water, yet each day she gave back more than anyone expected. The children followed her like petals drawn to sun. The fire never once dimmed under her care. And when Demeter, her youngest, grew ill with fever one night, Doso placed a hand on his brow and whispered words that made the candle flames still. And by morning he laughed as though he'd never wept. That evening Metanera sat beside the hearth, staring at the woman as she mended a tear in an old tunic. The light of the fire cast shadows that flickered like branches swaying in unseen wind. "You're not just a traveller," Metanera said softly. Dosso looked up. "No," she replied, "but I am tired, and I am grateful." Metanera hesitated. "Are you one of them?" Dosso did not answer. She only smiled, the kind of smile a river might give, having seen 1,000 years and knowing it would see 1,000 more. Outside, the sun slipped behind the hills, and the fields glowed gold for one lingering breath. In that moment, every leaf seemed to still. Every grain of dust caught in the air shone like a tiny star. And the people of Eleusis, though they could not name it, felt the presence of something ancient, something warm, and something watching. They locked their doors that night, not in fear, but in reverence. And the earth, quiet, golden, listening, prepared itself. Chapter 4, The Silent Miracle. It happened without song. No thunder cracked the sky, no trumpets echoed through the clouds. There was no procession, no blaze of golden light. There was only morning, and in that morning the world had changed. When the people of Eleusis awoke, they found the fields thick with green. Barley taller than a man swayed in neat rows, though no seed had been sown. Wildflowers carpeted the hills like woven cloth. Trees bore fruit so ripe it fell without touch. The air smelled of honey and new earth. The elders stood at the edge of the fields in silence, eyes wide. Children ran through the tall stalks laughing, their hands brushing against grain they had never seen grow. Goats paused mid-step, blinking in the golden haze. Even the birds, normally restless in their morning songs, sat quietly on the branches, as if listening for something older than sound. And Doso simply swept the threshold. She said nothing. She did not look toward the miracle, though her shoulders held the stillness of someone who already knew. But Metanera watched her, watched the way her hands moved with patience as if each motion was part of a prayer, watched the way the dust rose gently around her feet and caught the light like spun gold. That evening the villagers gathered in hushed awe. Was it her? Someone whispered. A blessing, another said. A gift from the earth. They lit a fire and left bowls of milk and honey at its base, not knowing whom they honoured, only that gratitude must be spoken somehow. That night the stars felt closer. The ground beneath the houses hummed faintly, like a lullaby remembered from long ago. And Doso sat quietly in the shadows of the firelight, her eyes closed, listening not to the people but to the soil. For it was speaking now, slowly, sleepily, like a newborn waking into purpose. And beneath the layers of root and rock, something had begun to stir. Not just growth, but understanding. Chapter 5, The Watching Eyes. Miracles, no matter how soft, do not go unseen. Word began to travel, not loudly, but in ripples like wind across grain. A village that no longer feared famine, children who grew strong without sickness, a field that yielded without sowing. Priests in distant temples furrowed their brows. Travellers paused at crossroads, whispering of an old woman whose footsteps greened the hills. And still, in Eleusis, Doso moved as she always had, sweeping, tending, kneading bread by hand. But the eyes grew sharper. Some watched with reverence, wondering if a goddess walked among them. Others watched with unease, for power, even when peaceful, unsettles those who cannot name it. One night, Celius himself sat beside the hearth, face lit only by flame. "You've brought blessings we cannot explain," he said gently. Doso did not look up. And would you rather I hadn't? He shook his head. No, but the world outside will come asking, and when they ask, they will not knock softly. Demeter's eyes lifted then, pale and old as ash, but filled with something deeper. They will not find what they seek, she said, because what I give cannot be taken, only received. Celius said nothing more. But the next day a boy followed her. Just a child, curious and quiet. He watched her walk the fields, her feet bare against the warm soil. He saw how the birds came near but never fled, how the flowers turned toward her without sun. He did not speak, only watched. That evening he told his mother, "She listens to the earth like it's speaking." And she does, the mother thought, though she didn't understand how. That night the villagers dreamed, not of riches or temples, but of soil, of seeds falling in slow spirals, of hands planting in rhythm with breath, of something ancient, sacred, and close. The watching continued, but what grew in Eleusis could not be weighed or measured. It lived in silence, in rhythm, in trust. And soon it would be revealed, not as power, but as mystery. Chapter 6. The First Ritual. The day began like any other. Golden light spilling through fig trees, roosters crowing, the quiet murmur of pots being filled. But the earth had shifted, not in trembling or quake, but in attention, as though it waited. Demeter, still cloaked as Doso, rose early, her eyes calm, her staff firm in her hand. She walked beyond the village, to the edge of the barley fields where the hills sloped down toward a grove of olive trees. There she paused. One by one the villagers came. Metanera, holding Demophon's hand. Celius, his face lined with wonder. Others followed, not by command, but by pull. No one spoke. They simply gathered. And Demeter began. She did not raise her arms or chant in thunderous voice. She did not summon winds or shape clouds. She knelt in the earth and pressed her fingers into the soil. Then gently she stood and said, "Life grows in silence, in darkness." Beneath, she handed a single seed to each person. "Bury it. Feed it. Wait." They did, each pressing their seed into the ground with trembling fingers. Demeter moved among them, speaking softly. She taught them how to cut the grain with curved blades shaped like the crescent moon, how to winnow with the wind, how to grind, how to bake, how to share. And more than that, she taught them when to listen. When the field rests, so must you. When the grain ripens, be grateful. When the harvest is taken, give back, even just a little, always a little. And last, she showed them how to walk the furrows in a certain pattern, slow, circular, spiral. Not for the plants, for the memory, for the story of the earth. By sunset, the villagers stood changed. Not visibly, they wore the same clothes, bore the same names. But something beneath the skin had deepened. They had not witnessed magic, they had become part of it. That night, as stars rose and the last birds quieted, Demeter sat beside the fire and whispered, "This is the first, there will be more. And so the rite began, not as commandment, as gift. Chapter 7, the Pact of the Seasons. Seasons, in those days, did not yet have names. There was sun, and there was not sun, growth and stillness, hunger and hope. But after Demeter walked the fields of Eleusis, the world began to move with new rhythm, not as a line, but as a circle. A slow turning, a quiet return. It was not she who named the seasons, it was the people in time. But it was Demeter who wove them. With every seed they buried, she whispered to the earth, "Sleep, but not forever." With every loaf they baked, she whispered to the fire, "Warm, but do not burn." With every harvest she whispered to the air, "Take only what you tend." And the earth listened. In return she gave rhythm, spring for the sowing, summer for the growing, autumn for the reaping, winter for the waiting, not punishment, not absence, just pause. Rest woven into the pattern. Demeter did not remain forever. She was a goddess, after all, and gods are not meant to live as mortals do. But before she left Eleusis, she called Celeus and Metaneira to her. "You were kind," she said. "You opened your door without knowing who I was, and so I leave with you a secret." She led them beyond the grove to a circle of stones beneath an old olive tree. There she knelt once more and placed her palm upon the ground. The stone warmed. A faint light glowed around its edge. "When the time is right," she said, "others will come, lost, curious, searching. Teach them." And from that moment the sacred rites were born, the Eleusinian mysteries, not written, not spoken aloud, passed in whispers, in steps, in the way the hand presses seed to earth, in the way silence falls before the harvest. It was not a religion, it was a remembering, and it began, always, with gratitude. Chapter 8, the Song Beneath the Soil. Long after Demeter had gone, the people of Eleusis still walked the fields differently. Their feet moved with care, their hands with reverence. Even their breath seemed to match the slow rhythm of the earth, as if they had learned not just how to plant, but how to listen. Children were told stories of the old woman who came at dusk, of how she made the fields bloom and healed the fevered child with nothing but her touch. But the elders did not speak her name aloud, not out of fear, out of respect, for Demeter had given them more than food, more than grain. She had given them a pact, a pattern, a mystery, and in return they had promised, silently, soulfully, to remember. So each year, at the turning of the season, they gathered at the edge of the old grove. They planted one seed in silence. They turned once, slowly, sunwise, and they placed a piece of bread on a stone warmed by their fire, not to call her, but to honour the gift. And somewhere, far beyond sight, Demeter walked still, her steps soft across distant fields, golden skirts brushing the grain, her hands brushing olive leaves and orchard bloom, her ears tuned to the low hum beneath the ground, the song that only she could hear in full, the song of the soil. It was not loud, It did not rise in choirs or echo through marble halls. It simply pulsed, soft and sure, the lullaby of life rising again and again and again. And if you walk a quiet field in spring, just as the light softens and the wind holds its breath, you might hear it too.